Essential for unscrambling mixed up families on FamilySearch. As Elder Brown mentioned, if you have any questions during the presentations, please take a minute to put them in the chat or maybe jot them down to ask at the end. Today, I will be combining a past presentation. I won't be combining a past presentation that I did. I did a previous webinar entitled Who's the Wife, in which I covered steps to go about deconstructing a mixed up family in the 19th century using the GRO, censuses, and marriage records that show the husband's name in England. Today, I'm going to do something a little bit more difficult. This is going to be deconstructing a mixed up family in the 18th century in England. So this is a lot more of a challenge because we don't have the benefit of the GRO, censuses, or marriage records, which show the father's name. I'm just going to walk through the process I go through. So in my research, I stumbled across this family in Cumberland. This is John and Mary Hodgson family, as it appeared on FamilySearch. I'm showing the family on 3 separate slides because it was really long and I couldn't get it all on one slide. The same John Hodgson, that is to say the John Hodgson who has the same PID number, has 3 different wives called Mary, all having children at the same time. So the first wife is Mary Bow, and she has 8 children. The second wife was Mary Smith, and she has 14 children. And the third wife is Mary Jefferson with 8 children. In this particular case, all 3 wives actually have a surname listed, but the places where the children are christened are not consistent and they overlap. So I'm going to go through the steps I would go through to deconstruct this mixed up family. First of all, starting with wife number 1, Mary Bow, I would print off the family group sheet for each family so I can make notes directly on it as I go along. To do this, you need to select the mother's name or the father's name. In this case, I selected the father's name, and go to the bottom right-hand bar under Tools and choose Print. And then select the family group record. So the family group record shows the family of the first mother, Mary Bow. I am showing only one of 3 pages here. So she had 3 pages on the family group sheet. The second thing I do is to get acquainted with Cumberland. I'm actually from Cambridgeshire in England, and that's a long ways from Cumberland. So I went to a map of England and looked for Cumberland, and here is a closer look at Cumberland. It's located right up in the northwest by the Scottish border. The county location, however, is not enough. I need to know the parishes in Cumberland. The FamilySearch 1851 England jurisdictions map, which would have been my map of choice, is currently undergoing some changes and updates. So I'm going to use the Philimore's Atlas and Index of Parish Registers. And the easiest way to find this is to go to the Ancestry card catalogue and put in Great Britain, Atlas and Index of Parish Registers. And as you do this, you'll see it brings up on the right-hand side all the different counties in England, and you would choose Cumberland. Here is a parish map. I know it's very small and you probably can't see all the parishes there, but we will look at it a little bit more closely as we go along. Another thing I do is I usually look at the change log over on the right-hand sidebar where it says latest changes and go to show all to see where things have started to get mixed up and see if I can restore information easily. But to be honest, it usually only serves to confuse me more. And so I'm not going to tackle the change log today. Catherine Grant has talked about the change log in some of her presentations, and maybe you can refer to those. So the next step is to get a feel for how many John Hodgsons are marrying someone with the name of Mary in the time period and place you are researching. Here in Find My Past, I use the advanced search to put John Hodgson with a wife's name of Mary in Cumberland around 1795, give or take 10 years. Notice I didn't put any specific parish, I just put Cumberland. I got 26 results. This is just marriages. So that's 26 John Hodgsons marrying a woman called Mary within a 20-year period. Up until now, that process has been relatively quick and easy. The next few steps are where the rubber meets the road. Be prepared to spend many hours researching and untangling, following every lead, no matter how flimsy, and digging into records that may not be very accessible. Also be aware that much of the research you will be doing is to eliminate families that do not belong to your family. Examine carefully each family looking for documentation. Check the marriage information. Check the sources for each child. Look for possible missing children. Here is the first mother listed, Mary Bow, who is shown having 8 children. Notice the various places in Cumberland where these children are christened. The green star indicates a child that also appears with John Hodgson's second wife, Mary Smith, as the mother. The marriage to John Hodgson is vague. It says the 2nd of June, 1789, but just says England. The second wife, Mary Smith, has a guesstimate as a marriage, time and place. She is listed with 14 children, which is not unheard of in this time period. But again, look at the various places in Cumberland for the christenings of her children. Note the red stars, which indicate that those children are also listed with the same PID number under the third wife, who is Mary Jefferson. Mary Jefferson has no marriage date, but her children, for the most part, look like they could be correct, although I am a little suspicious of the 3 children christened in Thursby. A quick look at the parish map shows Bruff by Sands, and it's spelled Berg by Sands, but in England, just like in Utah, we have Tooele and Duchesne, pronounced differently than they're spelled. Berg by Sands is actually pronounced Bruff by Sands. And Thursby, the other place that was listed on her family group sheet, are very close together. The other place listed is Hayton, which is a little further away, and that's where John Hodgson was purportedly from, but I have my doubts about that. Because the family of Mary Jefferson seems to be fairly consistent, that's where I would choose to start the research. The first thing I did was to check the sources for her children on FamilySearch. I started with Josiah, as his name is a little bit more unusual than the others. By the way, that's a good rule of thumb. Always start with someone that has a more unusual name. Note on the christening record for Josiah, it actually lists his mother's name as Jefferson. As I checked all of the other children, I was very pleased to see that her name was attached to them also. And even in the ones that were born in Thursby. You can see here, there was John Jefferson Hodgson. He even has the mother's middle name of Jefferson, and he was born in Thursby. I continued to check the children within a 40-year period on Find My Past, just to see that I hadn't missed any other children. Note on the left search bar, I use the advanced search to put in the father's name of John and the mother's name of Mary, and I searched in Bruff by Sands, plus or minus 20 years from the year 1800. Here are the results. They confirmed that there were 5 children born in Bruff by Sands. Other children that came up during that time period had different mothers, as noted. I also checked Thursby, which confirmed just the first 3 children born to this family. I then checked Ancestry.com, where I found Mary Jefferson Hodgson on the 1841 and 1851 censuses. The 1851 census, which you see here, gives her place of birth as Micklethwaite, Thursby, and her age is 79. So there's that Thursby coming in again. After I added that information on FamilySearch, I saw a hint from Find a Grave, which led me to find this great headstone, which has a lot of rich information that corroborates the date and children of John Hodgson and Mary Jefferson. I actually put this photo into ChatGPT and I asked AI to transcribe it, and I think it did a great job. You can see here that John Hodgson of Burgh by Sands, Rough by Sands, who died at Flat in 1840, age 71. Mary, his wife, who died in 1861 at age 86. And then it lists some of his children as well, and wives of some of his children. This was a great find. If this were my family, I would certainly dig deeper and see if I could find wills, censuses, and spouses for the children and additional death dates, etc. The one thing I could not find for John Hodgson and Mary Jefferson was a marriage. I looked all over for a marriage. My only thought is that maybe Mary Jefferson had been married previously, and so when she was married to John Hodgson, she had a different last name, but I couldn't find anything to substantiate that. Here they are, the thorough research that shows the completed family and adds the birth and death dates and places for both parents. I know you can't see this, I'd have to click in each one, but all of that is complete. You can see some of the children's death dates that were taken from the headstone, as well as John and Mary's death dates. Next, I decided to turn my attention to John Hodgson and Mary Bow. That family seemed the one that was the next most viable. The christening years and places are stated again on the right. The child with the green star is the only one that is included in another family, the one where Mary Smith is listed as the mother. However, notice that Cockermouth seems to be where most children are christened. Again, Cockermouth, even though it looks like Cockermouth, is how they pronounce it in England. Again, the first place I would check is the parish map. The parishes mentioned in John Hodgson and Mary Bow's family on FamilySearch are circled in green. Cockermouth, Mungersdale, Rough by Sands, Carlisle, and Hayton, where John Hodgson is listed as being from. A couple of things I would like to point out before we delve in. Mary Bow is listed as dying in 1796. However, 2 of the children attached to her were christened after her death. Also, her marriage has a specific date, but the place is just England. I'm going to start with the marriage date of John Hodgson to Mary Bow, searching for that. In the sources on FamilySearch, there is a source identified, Marriage Bonds and Allegations. Evidently, it was added, but the original image, which you see here on the right, which was attached, was probably not looked at, or at least not looked at very carefully. Here is the image enlarged. The highlighted part in yellow, several of them, state that at the time of marriage, Mary Bow was not of age. That shows it there on the right-hand side, meaning that she was not 21. It also lists her father as John Bow, and he's granting his permission to have her marry John Hodgson. On the left, at the top, it states that both she and John Hodgson were of Cockermouth. Although finding Mary Bow's christening record was not the goal, I just couldn't resist looking for a christening as a daughter of John Bow in Cockermouth. later than 1768, so that she would be younger than 21 in 1789. On Find My Past, I found her christened in 1770. And I was pretty excited about that. Now back to her children. The process was the same as for John Hodgson and Mary Jefferson. With everything lining up to believe her children were christened in Cockermouth, the fact that she was actually married in Cockermouth, and they said that they were both from Cockermouth, I went to Find My Past, and in the advanced search, put in parish baptisms in Cockermouth, Cumberland, for children with the last name of Hodgson and a father John and a mother Mary. I got 26 results. I went through and checked all the children in the time period where John and Mary would be having children. I found the 5 children that were listed on FamilySearch and added 2 more children to them. The mother's name on the first 5 children's baptism was just Mary. If you notice, there are check marks. There's also little ditto marks, which means that it's the same record. Sometimes you can find the same record on Find My Past from 2 different sources. I would have liked to have checked the original film, but after checking the FamilySearch catalogue, I found that the film is only viewable at the FamilySearch library in Salt Lake. As you can see by that little reel, that film reel, that's only available in Salt Lake. The last 2 children born in 1797 and 1799, respectively, listed the mother's maiden surname as Bow, even though the first 5 children only had her name as Mary. Here is Jane's christening on Find My Past, showing her mother's maiden name as Bow. So evaluating the timing of the christenings and seeing that they were the only John and Mary Hodgson having children at that time in Cockermouth, I felt that those were indeed their children. Now, as for the other children that were listed in that family, I checked the 3 of them, and this was the result. Mary Hodgson, born in 1793, had a mother whose maiden name was Walden, and this was in the sources on FamilySearch. So someone didn't read it very carefully when they attached her to Mary Bow. John Hodgson, who was born in Mungrasdale in 1794, was obviously born in a totally different place. His father's name was Jonah, not John. And Jonah could be his name, or it could be an abbreviation for Jonathan. So both Mary, born in 1793, and John, born in 1794, were eliminated from the John Hodgson and Mary Bow family. The other Mary with the green star that was listed as being born in 1796 turned out to be a mixture of different Marys and had descendants that lived in Utah. I could see several errors in the whole family and decided not to touch it at this point. I just removed her from the John Hodgson and Mary Bow family and corrected what I could without making too many waves. Additional research into the family found the death of John Hodgson in Cockermouth in 1800, which you see here. The search on Find My Past also revealed a will. Here is the original will, which turned out to be a 6-page will in which he names his wife Mary and his children John, Francis, Mary, Anne, and Jane as his beneficiaries. All those concurred with what we found earlier. They were all still alive at his death, and the will confirmed the reconstruction of this family. So here is how the John Hodgson and Mary Bow family now look on FamilySearch. Now I turned my attention to the John Hodgson and Mary Smith family. This was the one that obviously looked the most problematic. Firstly, using Find My Past, I searched for a marriage of John Hodgson and Mary Smith around 1795, give or take 10 years in the whole of England. I only received 2 hits. Both of these were in the south of England, not Cumberland. Neither of these looked very viable. Next, I looked for the children who had not been assigned parents. As mentioned before, we had the 5 children that were in Brough by Sands who were attached to Mary Jefferson and John Hodgson. I looked at the 3 children, John, Sarah, and Mary, that were born in Great Sockeld in 1804, and that looked like a good place to start. As I looked at the sources in FamilySearch, Sarah, John, and Mary had no sources attached, none. But they had exact christening dates in Great Sockeld. So I was curious and I inputted the information into a search on Find My Past. There was no results for children born to a John and Mary Hodgson in Great Sockeld in 1804. In fact, Great Sockeld didn't even come up as a possibility of christenings. So I was not deterred. I decided I would look for Great Sockeld in the FamilySearch catalogue. I found it in the catalogue, and I saw that I could look at the film at a family history centre. So I went to a family history centre, and finding the film, I looked at the year 1804. Here is what I found. May 13th, 1804, John, son of John Hodgson, and Mary, late Hodgson, and Sarah, their daughter, received into the congregation. I found that very interesting. So Mary's maiden name was Hodgson. She married a Hodgson, Hodgson married a Hodgson. And the children were received into the congregation, which means they were probably previously baptized, maybe in another place, but they were formally welcomed into the church. From there, I continued to look through the images of the original parish register because I couldn't find them anywhere else. And I found 6 other children who were christened, their parents being identified as John Hodgson and Mary Hodgson. Here is an example of one of them, Anne, who I found. She was born in 1821. The record is a little hard to read, but if you squint just right, you can see that it says her mother was late Hodgson, and it also gives the occupation of her father as an innkeeper, which I saw on several other of the children's christening records. I continued through the parish records, and I also found a burial of John Hodgson of Great Sockeld in 1823. You can see the yellow highlighted there. Thinking that an innkeeper might have a will, I checked Find My Past in the Death Duty Index, which can be found by searching all record sets. I put in John Hodgson in Cumberland and got 93 results. Here I found a reference for a will for John Hodgson in Great Sockeld in 1824, which corroborated very well with his death in 1823. Here is the original of the Death Duty Index with reference to the will, which I, of course, went and found. I did some more research. Here is the will itself, John Hodgson, and it says innkeeper, and it also mentions Mary, his wife. It's also there on the second page, but it doesn't mention specifically his children. However, I still felt like this was the correct person and the correct family. And lest you think I forgot to look for the marriage, I put it into Find My Past and found it in 1801 in Lazenby. I also checked the Lazenby original parish records because I always like to look at the original when I have if I can, which had more information. it states that John Hodgson was from the parish of Addingham, which is where I found a christening of their first daughter, Sarah. So if she was christened in Addingham, that explains why she was in 1801, she was actually christened, and in 1804 she was received into the congregation. That explains why she was received into the congregation and not christened again. In looking at the map, here are the 3 places in a cluster associated with John Hodgson and Mary Hodgson as a couple. Because of the risk of belaboring the point, I've used the same principles in all the families I deconstructed. I will just simply show you the results of the other 2 mothers that were mixed in with the John Hodgson and Mary Smith family. Here is the way the whole family was deconstructed. There they all are. So they had quite a few children. And here are the other mothers. In Brigham, the mother's name was Mary Thompson, as shown in orange. In St. Cuthbert, Carlisle, there were 2 children, and their mother was named Mary Room. Of course, the others we have seen, Mary Jefferson and Mary Hodgson. So hopefully that's given you some ideas of how to deconstruct families on FamilySearch. It is very time consuming and can be very confusing. So as I suggested earlier, it's always best to print out the family group sheet, make notes on it as you go along, and then you can keep everything straight in your mind. It's sometimes kind of difficult to do that. That's my presentation for today, and I just want to know if there are any questions that anybody has. I'd be happy to answer them if I can.
Thank you, Sister Brown. I'm looking at the questions in the chat. I don't see anyone. If anybody has any questions for Sister Brown. Geraldine McCormick says, thank you for a very clear presentation. I will add, Sister Brown, that one of my brick walls in one of my lines is a situation where I have a man that's married to 3 women all at the same time. And I got to that and I just didn't have the time or energy to untangle it, but you've given me the motivation to do that. So thank you so much.
Well, I hope so. Yes, it is I must admit, it is very time consuming, but it's very rewarding once you figure them all out.